If your avoidant ex showed these 5 specific behaviors before they left, the chances of reconciliation may be very low. The last pattern? It's the one that creates a psychological point of no return, and it's the one most people don't even realize is happening. I understand you're here because someone with avoidant attachment has ended your relationship, and you're looking for clarity about what might happen next. Maybe you're analyzing every conversation, wondering if they might reconsider. Today, I'll share 5 behavioral patterns in avoidant individuals when they're emotionally distancing themselves from relationships. These behaviors often follow predictable psychological patterns that can help us understand how avoidant attachment tends to work. I'll explain each pattern, the psychology behind it, and discuss the situations where these patterns might not apply. But here's what most people don't realize. These aren't just signs someone is pulling away. They're actually stages in a psychological process that, once complete, makes reconnection extremely unlikely. What you learn about avoidant behavior could completely reframe how you understand not just this relationship, but how emotional intimacy actually works. Let me start with something that might be difficult to hear, but understanding these patterns could help you make sense of your situation. There are 5 behaviors that often indicate when someone with avoidant attachment has emotionally distanced themselves from a relationship. What makes these patterns particularly significant is that many people focus on the obvious signs, like arguing or growing apart, while missing the subtle psychological shifts that actually determine whether someone will ever come back. These behaviors can begin long before the relationship officially ends. Pattern number 1: gradual emotional withdrawal. The first pattern is gradual disengagement. This typically isn't a sudden, dramatic ending. Instead, it often unfolds slowly over weeks or months. This might look like slower responses to messages, less frequent quality time together, decreased physical intimacy, or seeming mentally absent during conversations. You might notice they seem physically present but emotionally elsewhere. This gradual withdrawal often involves what psychologists call deactivating strategies, ways that people with avoidant attachment may unconsciously manage their discomfort with emotional closeness. It's as though they're gradually reducing their emotional investment in the relationship. What can make this particularly challenging for reconciliation hopes is that during this withdrawal period, the avoidant person may be mentally adjusting to life without the relationship. By the time they officially end things, they may have already processed much of their feelings about the separation. Pattern number 2: limited emotional sharing. The second pattern involves ongoing challenges with vulnerability and emotional sharing. If your avoidant partner rarely opened up about their inner world, fears, or deeper needs, this may reflect more than just personality differences. Research suggests that people with avoidant attachment can struggle with emotional awareness and expression. Without deeper emotional intimacy, it can be difficult to form the strong bonds that typically motivate people to work through relationship challenges. Consider this. If someone rarely shares their vulnerable side or communicates their actual needs, it becomes very difficult to build the kind of connection that people usually fight to preserve. The relationship you experienced may have felt different to them than it did to you. Pattern number 3: recurring unresolved issues. Think back to your relationship patterns. Were there certain disagreements that seemed to repeat without resolution? Perhaps conflicts about emotional availability, need for space, or communication styles. People with avoidant attachment often find conflict particularly uncomfortable, because it can require vulnerability and emotional engagement. When the same issues arise repeatedly without resolution, they may begin to see this as evidence that the relationship fundamentally won't work. This can create a form of learned helplessness, a sense that no matter what happens, the relationship problems can't be solved. Rather than developing new communication strategies, they may begin to disengage entirely. Pattern 4. Critical communication as emotional distancing. The fourth pattern involves what might seem like sudden criticism or complaint sharing right before or during the breakup. You might have heard things like, "you always," or "you never," or issues they'd never mentioned before. Many people interpret this as anger or intentional cruelty, but relationship experts often see it differently. This might represent a final attempt at communication, albeit a poorly executed one. They may be trying to express unmet needs, but doing so when they've already mentally decided to leave. What makes this pattern particularly telling is the timing. If this criticism appeared right before the breakup, it may indicate they had already emotionally decided to end the relationship and were perhaps trying to justify their decision to themselves. Pattern 5. Complete communication cutoff, the psychological point of no return. And this one is fundamentally different from the others. It's complete cessation of all contact. Not just romantic contact, but all communication. No casual check-ins, no social media interaction. Complete silence. Here's why this pattern is uniquely significant. While the first 4 patterns show someone pulling away, this 5th pattern shows someone actively protecting their decision to leave. For people with avoidant attachment, this complete cutoff isn't about punishment or game playing. It's their nervous system creating what psychologists call a psychological firewall. When someone with avoidant attachment cuts all contact, they're not just avoiding you. They're avoiding their own potential feelings about you. Research suggests that maintaining any connection, even friendly contact, keeps neural pathways active that could trigger their attachment system. By going completely silent, they're essentially letting those pathways go dormant. This is why pattern 5 is qualitatively different. The other patterns show someone struggling with intimacy, but this pattern shows someone who has successfully shut down their attachment response to you entirely. Avoidant individuals may process relationship memories differently during this phase, potentially focusing more on conflicts and difficulties rather than positive moments. This isn't necessarily conscious. It might be their mind's way of maintaining the emotional distance they've created. What makes this the psychological point of no return is that once someone has successfully deactivated their attachment system toward you through complete silence, reactivating it would require them to deliberately choose vulnerability again, something that goes against their core protective instincts. Now, let me discuss the important exceptions to these patterns. Sometimes, though not commonly, someone with avoidant attachment might reconsider if they've done significant personal work. This might involve therapy, major life experiences, or substantial self-reflection that helps them understand their attachment patterns. Even in these cases, they would likely be approaching relationships very differently than before, having learned new communication and vulnerability skills. Another consideration is the difference between dismissive avoidant and fearful avoidant attachment styles. Fearful avoidant individuals sometimes engage in push-pull dynamics and might be more likely to reconsider relationship decisions. It's also worth noting that attachment styles aren't destiny. People can develop more secure patterns through relationships, therapy, and personal growth, though this typically requires intentional effort. Here's the perspective shift that understanding these patterns can provide. What you experienced wasn't a relationship that failed. It was a relationship with someone whose nervous system is wired to find deep intimacy threatening. The patterns you witnessed, gradual withdrawal, limited vulnerability, repeated unresolved conflicts, critical communication before leaving, and complete silence. These aren't random behaviors. They're actually a systematic process that avoidant individuals often go through to protect themselves from what feels like emotional danger. This means their behavior likely wasn't about your worth as a partner, your attractiveness, or your lovability. It was about their own relationship with intimacy itself. Understanding this can be both liberating and heartbreaking. Liberating because it's not your fault. Heartbreaking because you can't fix someone else's attachment system. This is why people miss these signs. We tend to interpret relationship problems through our own attachment lens. If you're more comfortable with intimacy, you might see conflicts as problems to solve together. But to someone with avoidant attachment, those same conflicts might feel like proof that intimacy is dangerous and should be avoided. If your avoidant ex displayed these 5 patterns, they may have moved into a protective emotional state that makes reconciliation less likely. While understanding these patterns may not change the outcome, it can help you recognize that their behavior likely reflected their own challenges with emotional intimacy, rather than your worth as a partner. This knowledge might help you focus your energy on your own healing and future relationships, where emotional intimacy can be more readily shared. If you found value in this video, don't forget to like and subscribe.